nice to have you, Senator. I know, appreciate the joviality of the meeting here with old friends. But I would, no, you're going to be second. I would like to get the meeting started. I'm going to start this by asking my good friend Delvis Dutton down there to open us a word of prayer. Why don't you do that, Delvis? What's number?
Dear Lord, thank you for this time, and bless our actions today, and give us your will. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. There are three bills to take up, and one of them, the first one is Senate Bill 121. Now, you all know about the legislative license plates, and the question is whether any of us will be around long enough to enjoy the possibility of a retired legislative license plate. But I'll ask the author, Senator Jenkins, to come on up and tell us about his bill here for a second. You just use that microphone. It's wherever you want to be. There you go.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rice and members of the committee. Thank you for calling up Senate Bill 121, working from LC 352854. And simply what this bill does is to allow retired members of the General Assembly, much like many of our citizens who offer themselves for public service with the armed forces, etc., to at some point after leaving the General Assembly to be recognized by having the ability to have this distinctive license plate. As you know, many of you do give your life and your time and your service, and many of you are no longer known for who you are as an individual, but as someone, senator or representative. And so this bill simply would give those individuals who've retired from the General Assembly the opportunity to purchase such a distinctive plate, such as we do as members of the General Assembly at this time.
Okay. Are there any questions on this bill? It's pretty, all right. Representative Yates. What's the number? 22.
I mean, why is the other is $25? What's the difference there?
Well, again, this is what Legislative Council put in, and I took them at their word and knowledge that they were putting in the proper amount for the fee, sir, to be quite honest with you. I did notice that as well, but you're the first one that raised it.
Is motor vehicles here? No.
Yeah, they are. Les is in the back. You want to explain, Les, just the bill in terms of the $25 and the $35 fee? That's our standard fee for a first-time license plate holder. For on a special license plate, that's what the charge is, right?
But what's it?
Oh, that's right. You're not. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't see anybody from DOR.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
sitting here.
I believe that the manufacturing fee is the $25 fee.
Yeah,
the annual registration is the $35.
$35. That's true. Hold on a second.
For renewals, is that what it is?
No, that's the original fee. Terry, why don't you help us out on that a little bit? You're on.
Well, I do not pretend to be an expert in this area, but yes, it's my understanding this is standard across the board for all specialty tags. It's normally $25 origination manufacturer fee and a $35 renewal fee, and that's what's done for everybody. This is already current law.
Yeah, that's standard fee. It used to be $25. I think we upped the fees a couple of years ago, and 1066 was the bill we did it on. Yeah. John, that's been in place for a couple of years now. I want to recognize Mr. Dover, Representative. Welcome to the committee, and for your first time here, we appreciate it. This is his first committee meeting ever in his career, which means you cannot get a retired license plate yet. You have to survive 8 years here, and and do this. All right, Senator, I got a real question for you.
Yes, sir.
Some people have asked me about the possibility that retired legislators may not convey the public image after leaving the legislature that we would like them to. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think certainly the department could put rules in place that would warrant whether or not the retired legislator is worthy of continuing to be issued the plate on an annual basis.
So they got a DUI the year after, or maybe 2 DUIs, or maybe they lost their license or something like that, then probably. Of course, that could happen to somebody who's a member of the legislature and has a legislative tag also, right?
That is true, but well, fortunately or unfortunately, the citizens would have to then make that decision with respect
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years. But because this is an administrative privilege that we will be bestowing upon those retired legislators, it would be my recommendation that the department put in rules and procedures to govern their conduct and their worthiness to be allowed to utilize that tag on an annual basis.
I guess that rule would be pretty hard to interpret if, in fact, we were at a University of Georgia football game with bulldog tags on the back at a tailgate party. Would probably be another symbol of this. But seriously, you know, who brought is this just your idea, or did somebody bring the bill for you?
Quite frankly, it is.
Good.
Mr. Chairman,
I didn't mean to say just. I'm sorry. That's
no, but it's okay. I mean, I was riding down I-20 and was behind a Armed Forces retired tag, and it just came to me. And I said, what if? And discussed it with a couple of senators, and they liked it. In fact, one thing I would ask for this committee to consider is perhaps an eligibility date, because quite frankly, I've already gotten 2 calls from Covington, Georgia, with former legislators, and they are eager to know what their eligibility is. And it also did come up in the Senate with respect to what if you do have 2 living legislators from a similar district, who has the ability to get the tag over the other. So again, I think that is where the department would certainly have to come in.
Yeah, that'd be done
and put forth those administrative rules for eligibility.
I think it's a rule and reg. Yeah, you wouldn't want 295s or 296s or whatever they are going down the highway at the same time. Well, we do have one retired senator here that's had 25 years, and let me ask you a question, Richard. Let me rephrase that. You know, aren't you glad, former Representative Royal, that a senator brought this bill for your gratification?
And I am glad that he said that I didn't try to prompt him to do it, too.
Richard, congratulations once again on 25 years of service down here. We really applaud that. I got a question now on 28. Who's that? Oh, Darrell. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I think it's a great bill. I really appreciate you coming up with this. But just one question: will there be a retirement tag specifically for if you were a member of the House, as opposed to if you were a member of the Senate, or would there just be a General Assembly bill?
Glad you asked that question.
Oh, I don't believe it.
If the Chairman would allow, we'll pass it.
Sure.
Thanks to my local handy graphic artist that I can simply make a phone call to, and he gives me renderings. So
I don't think this would pass, Senator, if there wasn't a rocking chair emblem on the tag itself. Are there any other questions for Senator? Yes, I got Terry. You're on.
I just have a drafting question to be clear that I'm creating the intent of this committee. When it uses the word retired, do we mean former, or do we really mean that members have retired with 8 years of service, or that they served 8 years and have left? I just want to clarify that and make sure that it's doing what y'all want it to do.
Mr. Chairman, may I? The same question came up before the Senate committee, and it is my understanding that 8 years of service qualifies a legislator to be classified as retired from the Georgia General Assembly.
Terry, would that, I mean, suppose somebody runs for office in their 12th year and is not elected. Are they retired or not retired?
Automatically, is my understanding.
Yeah, but yeah, by weight of vote, yeah,
yes,
for sure.
I'm just not familiar with the General Assembly.
I don't know what the retirement. So that's the issue. I don't know what the retirement rules are in terms of.
It's 8 years.
It is.
Yes,
well, I know it's 8 years that you can elect. I mean, if you are qualified in 8 years under the program, but
Whether the member has actually filed for retirement or they're keeping those years in service, holding those years of service and not actually retiring.
Again, I believe that that should be a rule, the administrative reg that the department should promulgate.
Okay, Vice Chairman Epps.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for our Legislative Council. In your opinion, does these qualifiers of eligibility, can they be adopted under DOR rules and reg, or do they need to be made a part of this bill?
There's been multiple discussions about different qualifiers. It does appear that some of them would be very difficult for them to create or enforce in light of the language of this bill.
Okay. Senator, I think I'm going to suspend on this bill and just till we get a little more information. I don't think anybody from the department is here today. I don't see anybody from DOR here today. Oh, I'm sorry. They told me they could not make it today.
Okay.
But in any event, let's run down the language just a little bit more to make sure we're doing this all in the right fashion. I don't think there's anybody who has an opinion against having the bill. We just want to make sure we get it right. And so if you'll hang with us, we'll pick this up probably Wednesday of next week and hold another meeting on it.
Thank you,
With
Mr.
that,
Chairman.
we appreciate your time here, Senator Ramsey. Thank you for the,
Thank you,
for the
members
bill.
of the committee.
Okay. Mr. Loudermilk, Senator Loudermilk is here with Senate Bill 231. You'll just explain the bill to us. We would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just as a reminder, if you may remember back 9 years ago, the very first committee I came before was this committee, and you were the new chairman of it.
I don't remember back that far, Senator.
And I think you had a full head of black hair during that time, too. But that's
I think I had a lot of hair during that period of time. But you managed to wear it away with your bills over that period of time. So.
Well, hopefully this one isn't.
This is not it's not a traffic camera bill, is it?
This is not red light cameras. I think we've got what remains of red light cameras now are there truly for safety. I think we can come to that agreement between us all here.
All right, we proceed.
Senate Bill 231 is the original version just simply extended the sunset of Joshua's Law, which was passed in 2005 by the senator that preceded me in the 52nd District. Senator Preston Smith. The intention of the bill was taking a 5% carve out of traffic citations to be dedicated to driver's education in the schools, which many of us, when we were in school, I know when I was in high school, we had driver's education. Joshua's Law was named in honor of Joshua Brown, the young man from our district that was killed in a car accident. His father, Alan Brown, has championed this. And he's here today, and we'll be glad to come up and answer any detailed questions about the program and how it's progressed since we passed this law. One of the things that we realized when the law was passed back in 2005, I believe it was 2006, was that we do not have the ability to direct revenues to predetermined areas. It's appropriated through the appropriations process, but the law was passed with the intention that the revenues brought in from the 5% fee or fine, or 5% of the fines would be used for driver's education. And of course, not all of that has gone there. Probably very little of it has actually gone there. But this extends that sunset for another 5 years. The program still exists. This is just the 5% carve out that is destined or designed to go toward driver's education in the schools. During this, there was a floor amendment in the Senate that the minority party offered up that was not objected to. It was literally offered up right at the last second as I was yielding the well. Didn't get a chance to look at it other than just a cursory review. The intent of that amendment is good. I'm not sure that it meets the constitutionality of our prohibition against earmarking, but I think that there's maybe some things that could be done there to maybe work on that. But the original bill simply was just extending the sunset. So, Mr. Chairman, if there's questions, I'll try to answer them, but also, as I said, Mr. Brown is here who could answer probably more detailed questions as far as the program itself and its effectiveness. So.
Questions, Chairman Loudermilk? Any questions? Going once, going twice.
Don't encourage them.
All righty. Okay.
Forgive my ignorance. If we don't do anything, this is going to sunset.
Yeah, the sunset, the revenue, that revenue stream will sunset. So the 5% that it's carved out to go toward driver's training just simply goes away. I guess the rest of the code section is still there, dealing with Joshua's Law, but the 5% additional fine is what would sunset.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Dutton.
So let me get this right. 5 years ago, right, when it passed,
Mm-hmm.
and none of the money that's been collected has been allocated to what the original intent was.
Some has, but not to the extent that I think was the intention. I think Mr. Brown can give you the more details on the amount of number. My understanding is this year this would equate to around $10 million that would be brought in from this revenue stream. I hate to call it a revenue stream, but that's really the way that the state looks at it. But this 5% carve out of all traffic citations equates to about $10 million, which the original intent was to go toward driver's training in the schools. So this, how much has actually been spent, I think is, he can answer that question.
I think it's in the, I'm going to refer you to the auditor's report, Representative Dutton. This report we're looking at right here, it shows the totals of $57 million collected, $8 million approximately appropriated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Chairman Epps. Oh, was that for last time? Okay, all right. Let me turn that off then. This is a, we're going to have a hearing on this today, and we'll come back to this like the other bill. We'll come back to it next week after we get a chance to settle in on this issue a little bit further. The auditor's report, if you care to comment on this, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of the amounts collected and the amounts allocated to driver education, but I would ask the committee to pay attention to some of the follow-up review items, particularly the one on page 4, which talks about the 30 and 6 program and the partial implementation of that, and the findings of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on driver education and their recommendations. My only point here is this is a bigger issue than just what funds are appropriated. I think I'm going to ask Bob Dallas to comment on, this is off the cuff, Bob. I'm going to give you an opportunity to comment on this also. If you just hold on for a second about what the Governor's Office of Highway Safety program was to administer the money that you had in here before, because it happened while you were director of the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. So why don't you just come up to that microphone and just tell the committee for their benefit how that was administered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Governor Perdue, I served as the Director of Highway Safety, and it was during that time that this legislation passed and created the Georgia Driver's Ed Commission. And the then Commissioner of the Department of Driver Services served as Chairman, and I served as Vice Chairman to the Driver's Ed Commission. And initially what we did with the funds that were allocated to us by the legislature was focusing on where the data showed us there was need for having more driver's education available. And secondly, we also moved towards an online system that allowed students to take parts of the driver's ed online versus having to go in class. So with that, what we did is we funded programs throughout the state in different schools that needed driver's education. And secondly, we put in libraries terminals so that for those students who don't have terminals at home, that they could take driver's ed, the written part basically, through that terminal. And then the other thing that we did as a Driver's Education Commission was to focus on developing programs in the state that focused on teen driving issues. For example, the Department of Driver Services substantially improved, I think to probably one of the best in the country, the package that a parent and teen gets for signing off on meeting the 40-hour requirement and all the things that go with it. But the gist of it was, as the money was allocated by the legislature, then we would apply it to different programmatic efforts in the state, trying our best to use data as a guiding tool and best practices as we knew them at the time.
And that was based upon applications from the various organizations.
It
right?
was done in a very open way that we identified the need, and then programs or schools would apply for that. So then it would be reviewed by a review team and then ranked, and those that scored the highest would then be awarded the funds. And then we would develop systems to ensure that the funds were spent properly.
And by spent properly, allocated in what ways generally?
Well, generally, I mean, if for example, driver's ed equipment like the computer, the seat the kid sits in, the driving, the steering wheel was going to be purchased for a school, that was actually installed and being used. In one instance, in fact, DeKalb County, which stopped their driver's ed program, that equipment was allocated to another school district. So keeping up with equipment like that. Now, there were instances where we did purchase cars, and my understanding is that if a school system stopped using that car, I know under my watch, we moved it to another school. At some point, of course, the cars become valueless after they've been used enough.
You had approximately $8 million to allocate. Was that adequate to meet the needs?
Well, I think the need is when you consider as many kids that drive in the state of Georgia, is probably, I don't mean this pejoratively, but almost bottomless. The idea is making sure that the program that you allocated towards is effective. And there are a lot of programs out there. Some are very effective, some are not. And as I've observed over the years that the teens differ on how they absorb training and how they learn. And many instances, one program may work for 80% of the kids, one program may work for 20% of the kids. Does that mean you abandon the 20% program if it's effective for those kids? If the cost is right, perhaps not. So a lot of that may include some judgment components, but it's really important, in my view, that each program is looked at by the experts in the field to ensure that the dollars are properly spent. And you got to follow up. You just can't give money out there without ensuring that you have fidelity to the program that you've been funding.
Okay. One other question, and you can just stay there, Senator. That's fine. One other question, and that has to do with this, the state auditor's report that references the Highway Traffic Safety Organization's examination of current driver education programs back in 2009, and that they said that the driver training programs have proven ineffective at reducing teen driver crash rates due to the short-term effect and lack of focus on safety. Then they proposed some new standards, which goes to 45 hours of classroom as opposed to 30, and 10 hours of behind the wheel instead of 6. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I suspect my name is probably in that study. The current minimum that we've all lived with, the 30 hours and the 8 hours of driving, that was developed many years ago. And back in the 70s, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, conducted a study in DeKalb County and tried to look at the outcomes of the kids who took the course and those who didn't. The conclusion was they couldn't tell a difference, and therefore that study back in the day suggested, well, driver's ed is really not changing the outcome, so why spend that money? I think as we fast forwarded, in fact, when that study came out, it was re-looked at, and it wouldn't have been done the same way today. You don't have the same tools then as you do today in terms of how you analyze things. My view is that when it comes to driver's ed, I believe it's a key component of ensuring that the teen is taught the proper way to do it. It's kind of like manners, I guess. Many times we will not maintain our manners in certain circumstances, but at least you know you're violating it. And oftentimes my concern is that if you don't have professionals teaching the student, then people are learning as they see how everybody else drives and how their parents teach them to drive. And while, I have 5 boys and I think I'm a great parent, I'm not a great teacher.
So the 2009 study
it encourages more time. And
right.
My advice, and this is Bob Dallas speaking when people ask, and I've actually written an article on just this, is if I had a kid, with my kids, I would get them their learner's permit as soon as possible and then have them become my chauffeur. until they're 17, and then decide whether or not they're eligible to get their restricted license. But by that time, they're going to have 300 hours plus of drive time under every single circumstance, and they will have taken driver's ed. And I'll tell you why, for this simple reason. The excitement of driving when you're young and new to being a driver is one of those things that I think causes too many kids to take too many risks. If you can get rid of that excitement by those additional hours, it's my belief, then it's less likely that kid will take steps that are risky. And now, realize too that this is the driver's ed component. George has done a great job with your leadership and this committee's leadership in putting in place a whole host of teen driver laws that the data have shown have worked. The number of occupants that are not related, the time of driving, all those different things have proven to work in our state such that this state is one of the best in the country in terms of the fatality rate for teens.
Any questions for Mr. Dallas while we have him up here? Seeing no questions, thanks Bob, for coming up today. I'd like to move to the amendment that was put on in the Senate, and I'd like to have Terry, if you would rule on or tell us what you believe to be the constitutionality of that particular amendment.
My opinion that it would be unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional
earmarking, yes.
Okay.
No disagreement from me there, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Like I said, this was a minority amendment that was put on literally the
All right.
last second.
The committee. Thank you. And unless there's any further questions for the author, thanks for coming, Barry. We'll pick this up next time. But one, go ahead. We're finished, I think, on that basis. I just want, for the committee's purposes, what this calls on us to do, and we kind of do this every couple of years, is to say whether we're going to sunset this or not. Sunset this. It's a 5% fee on the traffic violation. So if you figure it out, if it's a $100 violation, somebody's going to pay $5 extra on each one of those violations. Like so many other things in the fee structures that are above the fines, which in Gwinnett County right now are probably about 45% more than 45% of the current fine. So if you had a $100 fine, 45% of it would go towards fees, which would be Superior Court retirement, some police things, a number of different things that are in this list. Probably about, I don't know, Alan, would you say there's probably about 10 or so different things that are in the list that are fees. And so the question for the committee is whether or not we implement a sunset provision, extension to the sunset, or we look at this from the standpoint of maybe a different way, and that goes back to Representative Jay Powell, or Chairman Jay Powell's bill last year that passed the House but did not pass the Senate. I think it passed the House. Did it pass the House or not? It did. And that bill placed a limitation on these types of fees if, in fact, there was a formula that was put in place which is fairly complex. But basically what it did was to say if it's not being used for the purpose that it was originally set, not appropriated, then there's a reduction in the fee. And it's a 25% reduction per year over 4 years. I think that's what it is, Todd, in the fee itself, if in fact it's not appropriated for the use that it was originally set up for. And I would suggest to the committee that as we go forward and have our next meeting, you'll probably see a substitute with some language in it like that approaches that type of a situation. Personally, I don't know, from a discussion standpoint of the committee, I think it's a good thing to limit these fees if in fact they're not going to the purpose that they're originally serve, or if they, if that particular fund is so much funded for that particular issue that any more would just be, gravy. So anybody comment on that? I know, Mr. Powell, you have strong feelings on this, and I'll give you
have
the
a strong feeling on this.
Undoubtedly.
And I've read the amendment, the committee sub, and that's a good step forward. But also for the benefit of the committee, since this is only going to be a work in progress until we meet next, I'd also like to throw out possibly another idea, and that would be to cut the percentage if we know that there's only a minute part of that 5% that is gone, cut it to 1%, cut it to 0.5%, cut it. And that way you just bypass all the fluff of this money being dumped and perpetually being dumped over into the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
That's just straightforward to it.
Thank you, Chairman Pell. Got number 26 down there. Who'll be that? Oh, it's Chairman Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a co-signer on Chairman Powell's bill last year, Jay Powell's bill, and the intent, and of course, you know, the closeness that I have with the individual that this fund is named after. I think the intent is great. I've been saddened by the fact that for the years that we have had it, that it went into the general funds. It was I think it was abused, and many people were misled. And I certainly would not want to be a party to anything that would indicate we're going to do one thing and we don't. And I hope that we can come up with something that will allow the governor and those who allocate the funds to be able to direct more to the driver safety program. But the intent, I think, is great, and I hope we will continue to move forward on doing something about this.
Any other discussion before I ask for anybody in the audience who wants to comment? Know that Josh's dad is here, the one who's named Joshua's Law is named after. So why don't you come on forward and comment? No, you got to come to the microphone. I'm sorry. You know, you should be used to this by now. It has been a while.
It's good to see everyone, and thank you for.
Why don't you just say for the record who you are and who you represent?
My name is Alan Brown. I'm the chairman of the board of the Joshua Brown Foundation and Joshua's father, that Joshua's Law is named for. I got several thoughts, if I might. Number one, I want the committee to please understand I don't have a horse in this race, except other than it's named for my son, and I have a strong desire to keep your children alive. I'm out in society a lot. There's 181 school boards in Georgia. I've stood before 103. 99 has expressed serious interest about teaching driver's education if they could get funding. I'm familiar with the NHTSA study. I'm going to ramble if I can a little bit with the NHTSA study. And I might add that that program was written in the late 50s, studied in 1983, and I agree it does not work in the year 2013. So what does work? That's the next question. Some more research, if I might. The Governor's Office of Highway Safety nationally just put out a research that you may have seen that says teen fatalities as a nation are rising. In Georgia, they continue to fall. So a fair question is, what is Georgia doing that the rest of the country is not doing? And the answer is Joshua's Law. Also, I was with my friends at the Center for Disease Control a couple of weeks ago, and they shared with me a study they did that says the same thing. The A.O. Buick Research Institute of Kennesaw State just a couple of months back did a study. May I approach to hand these out, please, sir?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, one side of me says, while we're waiting on that, one side of me says if we're not going to fund it, let it die. But the other side of me that has lost a child and my most precious gift from God says if we let it die, it's never going to get funded. It's gone forever. I can tell you that schools that teach driver's education, they marry it a half a semester with something like health or PE, which makes it a 72-hour course. Cartersville High School, for instance, we put a 5-point program in there that we put in a lot of high schools in Georgia that contains simulation, an interactive curriculum, hazard recognition that we got from UPS, parental involvement, and behind-the-wheel training. we put that program in there in the fall of '04. They were losing 2 children a year. They've not lost a kid since. What you're looking at, if I might say very quickly, is a study done by, again, the Bureau Institute of Public Policy at Kennesaw State. And what they did, they picked counties and schools at random, purely at random, that got Joshua's Law money. Remember, $8 million has been funded. Now, these schools, this is the schools, the counties that the schools are in. And they did pre-Joshua's Law, which is 2000 to 2005, after Joshua's Law. And what are the statistics? If you can look, Mr. Chairman, even in your county, you've gone from 23 to 5. That's pretty amazing. And as a state, teen fatalities are down 50%, and that's substantiated by the Governor's Office Highway Study, by the Center for Disease Study. And these at-random towns that got Joshua's Law money that teach driver's education in at least some of the local high schools, you can see the numbers, 100%, 100%, 100%, 90%, the worst one, 58% reduction in teen fatalities. So my goal, and again, I have no horse in the race other than it's named for my son, and I don't want you to have to live in the pain that I wake up in every day. You can't imagine the pain. So I want this to be funded. Society tells me every day of my life, I get phone calls every day of my life, society tells me they want this. People are upset that it's not being funded. I get emails from, for instance, a young man that went to the Air Force Academy sent me an email and said, "Thank you for saving my life." He said, I was ran off the road on Interstate 85 in Gwinnett County by a tractor trailer. I flipped twice. I walked away with bruised knuckles, and my girlfriend walked away without a scratch. And what was going through my brain as that crash was unfolding was situations I had learned on the simulator that kept me out of oncoming traffic and saved my life. That's pretty cool to get those kind of emails. I do get some hate emails occasionally from a kid that says, "Who do you think you are that you can make me spend $400 on driver's education?" And I always respond that I'm not your problem. I want it to be in the schools, and I want it to be the right driver's education, and I want it to be free. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Anybody got any questions for Mr. Brown? Mr. Brown, thanks for coming today, and thank you for testifying.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on this? Seeing none. Going once, going twice. Nobody else. Okay. Well, we're going to suspend on this. You'll see a substitute, and that'll address the constitutional issue that's been brought up, and you'll also see a substitute that deals with some other issues. Mr. Edge, do you have any desire to speak about what you would like to see in this bill also?
Mr. Chairman, I'll put it out there just for a moment.
Why don't you do that?
That way they can be giving some thought before you come around. I'm Skin Edge, representing the Georgia Municipal Court Judges Association. I had approached Chairman Rice when I saw this bill about possibility of some language dealing with the ability of municipal court judges to impose court costs when cases come before them. Currently, as former Judge Caldwell can tell you, Superior Court judges and state court judges have the ability to impose court costs should they so choose. Municipal court judges cannot do that. What we have in the state currently is a myriad of costs that have been imposed through the municipal courts based on local legislation: jail fees, law library fees, technology fees, whatever. And I think that concern, which sort of mirrors what Representative Powell raised a moment ago, led us to look at this possibility of using some statewide language to kind of get a handle on that, so there's some uniformity, and frankly, so there's no question about whether or not it is proper and legal to do that. I will tell you the chairman and I discussed this briefly with Legislative Council this morning about this. I'm going to talk some more with my folks at the Council of Municipal Court Judges to kind of see if we can get a handle on exactly what is involved with these local legislation fees now, to see if we can come up with some language that perhaps will give some uniformity to this and frankly prohibit the proliferation of more and more fees and assessments and that type of thing, which I know a lot of you are concerned about. So we'll be working on that the next few days, and hopefully we'll have something to bring to the committee. So I appreciate the time, and certainly will appreciate any suggestions any of you have in that regard.
Mr. Edge, do you know whether or not these are what the local folks are doing in terms of setting these fees is constitutional or not?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, and I know that is subject to question. I will put it that way.
Would the legislative council like to comment on that, or did you like to leave now?
I would like to. I have another meeting. This is a common practice, but it is the position of the Office of Legislative Counsel that these are unconstitutional, or I say that are likely to be interpreted by a court to be unconstitutional if contested. Yes.
And that's something we want to address, so there is no question about it.
Any questions for Mr. Edge on this issue? Well, Johnny, what do you think down there? You've been in this situation. Think it's a good idea? You want to talk in your microphone for a second? What number is it?
I thought I was probably loud enough. If you look at all of the fees that are handed out now on any case that basically somebody gets probation or gets a fine on, whether it's through Superior, State, Municipal, Probate, or whatever, as you just said, the fees now are outpacing the fine themselves. And of course the problem when they first started this with prosecutors and law enforcement fees, so to get training, initially I think they got 2%, and then they finally got up to somewhere around 3 to 5%, and all the rest of the money went into the general fund as it is with this. So maybe I'm not a good person to ask, because it's a good policy, but it's just not operated correctly, and until we can get that done so that they go to where, as Mr. Brown, so that it goes to where it's supposed to go to, that it's a real problem, and I think a constitutional problem as well. It's just nobody's never really fussed about it, because if I was getting to go home, I was willing to pay the fee and fine instead of going to jail, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
And so it hasn't ever really been tested in that vein.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just say in response to that, we're certainly not looking to pose an additional burden. Frankly, we're trying to get a handle on what's going on now to make it fair and uniform and across the board.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Edge. I appreciate you coming today. We're going to suspend on that one, and we'll hold on House Bill 231 until Wednesday of next week. Is Senator Hill here? I didn't see you back there, Hunter. Come on up and tell us about Senate Bill 122. And by the way, members of the committee, we will take action on this bill today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pleased to bring before you Senate Bill 122. I wish it was a House bill. I'm hoping that y'all will help me make it become a House bill. But this was brought to my attention, frankly, by the Atlanta Metro Chamber, representing a lot of businesses in our community, and not just in the Metro Atlanta, but all over our state, that have foreign nationals employed in our state, helping build our economy or grow it. And they come here on a valid visa, and we give them a driver's license, a real ID compliant driver's license, and the expiration date of that driver's license is tied to the expiration date of that visa. And many times they are asked to stay here longer by their employer, and so they go through the process of asking for an extension to their visa through the federal government, but the federal government doesn't immediately grant them a yes or a no. There's time, and the federal government gives them paperwork saying we've seen your application and we'll take some time to review it. Problem is during that time they're here legally, their driver's license has expired. So this bill allows them to be granted a 120-day paper extension so that they can continue to drive here while the federal government either approves or rejects their application for an extended visa. And that's the whole bill right there. So I'd love to take any questions. I will say that the Georgia Chamber supports this as well, and we worked very closely with the Department of Driver Services to make sure that department as well is not infringed by this bill.
Well, thank you, Senator Hill. Are there questions? We got a question down there from.
Is it not true this is very similar to a bill brought to us by B.J. Pack, Representative Pack?
Well, you want to explain that, Senator Hill?
I believe that B.J. Pack's bill was reciprocation, and that is that basically says if you have a driver's license, from Korea or from Germany, then we will honor that driver's license here in the States. And so this is not that, because we still require our foreign nationals to take the test for initial issuance.
I think that's the difference. The PAC bill was left it to the department to form a reciprocal agreement, and those agreements are done country by country. And so you'll see one for Korea, you'll see one for, but other states are doing the same thing. But the difference is that these are people here that are on visas. These other reciprocal agreements are really business people type situations that it's championed by the economic development folks. Other questions?
Have one.
Chairman.
Thank you for the bill, and I know this is an ongoing problem that we have. The extension, is that automatically given to them, and that is registered when they get their driver's license, or is this something that they realize maybe in the month prior to their visa expiring and their driver's license, that they have to go somewhere and get that extension? How does this process work?
The process for the 120-day extension?
Right.
They couldn't get this extension without first applying for an extension to their visa. So that's the paperwork they need, is paperwork from the federal government saying we've received your application for extension for your visa. And, of course, they'll have their valid driver's license that's still valid for the 30 days or 15 days, and this paperwork from the federal government saying we've received your visa extension. And then our Department of Driver Services would make sure that the paperwork is good to go, and then they would issue a 120-day paper driver's license.
Follow up to that. One of the concerns that you had was the time lapse between the expiration date and when they could get it renewed. This time, once they file that, again, if the employer decides in the last month to extend a contract with someone that is here, how long does it take for them to get that extension on their visa once applied for?
We've heard some varying debates, but it's around 4 months. That's why the request for the 120 days. But it can be longer, and if it's longer, that's unfortunate for that person, because they'll only have the 120-day extension. But we're hoping the federal government can do it, within that 4-month time frame.
Okay.
Any other questions for Senator Hill? Senator, there was a question we talked about a little bit with the department in terms of the fee associated with this. That's on line 41. That it says the issue upon submission of required documentation and application fee and the amount to be determined by the department. I know the department's represented here. Les, did you have is that language okay with you? Okay, you didn't want to put a cap on that, like $5,000 or something like that, or I mean, okay. You plan to be judicious in your application of the fees for this. Okay, all right. Well, discussion on the bill, committee members. If not, is there a motion? Move to pass. There's a second on. All in favor of House Bill, Senate Bill, I'm sorry, Senator, You got me started on that. Senate Bill 122 with a do pass recommendation. Move on. Say aye. Any opposed? Like sign. Good. So you're going to need to go up to rules and get your application in rules to get heard on the calendar, and
Okay.
that might be
I will do
want to
that.
be your next stop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I had asked Representative Golick to carry it for me in the House, but my friend here at the end of the table said he'll do it, so whatever pleases the chairman.
Well, Demetrius is going to get an opportunity, and if there are any questions that Mr. Douglas doesn't feel comfortable with, I might go down front, or Mr. Powell might go down front, and we'll, or somebody else of august natures down here. That was for you. We'll help
Okay.
Mr. Douglas.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Senator.
much.
Yeah. We're adjourned.